Imagine this. You're standing at the edge of a cliff, wind clawing at your clothes, the void below whispering your name. In your hand, a blade glints, a tool, a weapon, a promise. You've carried it for years, this blade, sharpened by every failure, every betrayal, every moment you folded inward and called it resilience. But here's the paradox. What if the blade isn't meant to cut away your weakness, but to carve it into something unbreakable? You've been told strength is the absence of fear. That weakness is a flaw to hide, a wound to cauterize. But what if the opposite is true? What if your fragility, the trembling hands, the sleepless nights, the voice that says, "I'm not enough," is not a defect, but a dormant code waiting to be decrypted? Nietzsche once wrote, "You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star." But what if the chaos isn't the problem, but the solution? Consider the lie you've swallowed whole. That vulnerability is the enemy. That to be strong is to armor yourself against uncertainty, to silence the parts of you that ache, doubt, or yearn. Yet here's the trap. Armor grows heavy. It rusts. It becomes a coffin. You've spent years perfecting the art of invulnerability, only to wake up one morning and realize you're not a warrior. You're a statue. But here's the question that will unravel you. What if your greatest weakness, the thing you've buried like a corpse, is actually the key to a power you cannot yet comprehend? What if the shame you carry, the fear that paralyzes you, the self-doubt that gnaws at your ambitions, are not obstacles to transcend, but raw material to forge into a weapon? Think of the stories you tell yourself. I'm too sensitive. I can't let go of the past. I'm afraid of being seen. These are not confessions. They're incantations. Spells you cast to keep yourself small, safe, sterile. But Nietzsche's Zarathustra did not preach safety. He demanded we become a bridge to the overman, a crossing forged through the abyss of our own limitations. So why do you cling to the ledge? Here's the unsettling truth. You've been trained to worship strength as a static monument, but real strength is a verb. It's the act of falling apart and choosing again and again to rebuild yourself into something stranger, something fiercer. The caterpillar doesn't overcome its weakness. It digests itself into liquid and emerges with wings. But here's the catch. You'll never outrun the parts of yourself you despise. They'll stalk you, shape you, sabotage you, until you stop running and turn to face them. The man who fears rejection becomes a master of reading rooms. The woman who battles self-doubt develops an unshakable instinct for truth. The child who survives abandonment learns to see the invisible threads between souls. Weakness, you see, is not a liability. It's a radar, a compass, a map to the mines buried in your psyche. Mines that, when detonated, will clear the path to your becoming. Yet you resist. You resist because confronting the raw, unfiltered truth of who you are feels like staring into the sun. It burns. It blinds. It threatens to dissolve the fragile narrative you've built your life upon. But what if that dissolution is exactly what you need? What if the self you're clinging to, the you that's polite, predictable, acceptable, is just a shadow of the self you're capable of becoming? This is the great question. Are you willing to stop erasing your weaknesses and start alchemizing them? To stop seeing your flaws as scars and start seeing them as tattoos, symbols of battles survived, lessons etched into your flesh? Nietzsche warned, "He who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster." But he also said, "You must be ready to burn yourself in your own flame. How could you rise anew if you have not first become ashes?" The cliff remains. The blade waits. The wind screams. But here's what you haven't yet grasped. You're not here to throw the blade into the abyss. You're here to plunge it into your own heart and let it cut out the story that says you're unworthy of greatness, The next 20 minutes will not comfort you. They will not affirm you. They will dissect you. They will demand you confront the lie that you are broken. And in that confrontation, you will find the raw materials for a revolution. Are you ready to stop running? You've felt it. The invisible hand around your throat when you dare to speak your truth. The suffocating grip of a narrative you didn't choose but inherited. Let's dissect it. The problem isn't your weakness. It's the story you've been told about weakness. A story written by empires, religions, and algorithms that profit from your self-loathing. A story that says, to be worthy, you must be seamless. But here's the rot at the core. The myth of flawlessness is a cage disguised as a ladder. Freud called it the superego. That internalized parent, society's voice hissing, not enough. Jung named it the shadow. The parts of yourself you exile to the basement of your psyche, only to find them leaking through the floorboards in nightmares and panic attacks. But Nietzsche saw deeper. He recognized that morality itself is a battlefield. The weak are taught to see their tenderness as sin, their doubt as heresy, their hunger as greed. Master morality celebrates strength as good, weakness as bad. Slave morality inverts it, painting meekness as virtue, power as corruption. You're trapped between these poles, ashamed of your fragility, yet paralyzed by the guilt of wanting more. Schopenhauer called life a pendulum swinging between boredom and pain. You felt that swing, the ache of unmet desire, the void when a goal is reached, only to find it hollow. This is the trap of external validation. You've been conditioned to seek strength in approval, in likes, titles, applause. Yet these are just bandages on a gaping wound. The wound is this: you've conflated being with performing. You think, if I'm not producing, achieving, impressing, do I even exist? Huxley warned of this in Brave New World. Not through chains, but through pleasure. Not through oppression, but through distraction. You're groomed to crave comfort, to avoid the messy, molten core of your being, to numb the parts that scream, this isn't all there is. But numbing is a slow suicide. Every time you scroll, binge, or chase dopamine, you're voting for the prison you're in. Sartre would call this bad faith, lying to yourself that you're trapped, that you have no choice. We are condemned to be free, he said. You're not a victim of your weaknesses. You're a fugitive from your own freedom. You've outsourced your power to scripts written by others. Be humble, stay small, don't make waves. But humility becomes self-erasure when it demands you silence your voice. Frankl, survivor of Auschwitz, wrote that meaning is found not in comfort, but in suffering. Yet you've been sold the lie that pain is a glitch to be fixed, not a signal to be decoded. You pop pills to numb grief. You chase productivity to outrun guilt. You curate a highlight reel to hide the chaos. But what if the chaos is the point? What if the human condition isn't a problem to solve, but a paradox to embrace? Here's the hidden root. You've been severed from your telos, your inherent purpose. The ancients understood this. Aristotle spoke of eudaimonia, flourishing through virtue. The Stoics taught amor fati, love of fate. But modernity has replaced purpose with productivity, virtue with virality. You're a machine part, oiled by hustle, rewarded for compliance. Your weaknesses, the parts that refuse to conform, are not bugs. They're rebellion. Consider the addict, the perfectionist, the people pleaser. These are not flaws. They're failed revolutions. The addict chases oblivion because the present is unbearable. The perfectionist worships control because chaos terrifies them. The people pleaser sacrifices their needs because they equate love with utility. Each is a distorted hunger for wholeness, twisted by a world that says, your needs are inconvenient. But Nietzsche's will to power isn't domination. It's the raw, roaring force within you that demands expression. It's the artist who paints through tears, the activist who riots in despair, the lover who whispers, "I'm scared," and stays anyway. Your weaknesses, the parts you despise, are not chains. They're kindling. The problem is not that you're broken. It's that you've been taught to see brokenness where there's only becoming. The cracks in your armor aren't vulnerabilities. They're portals. The shame you carry isn't a verdict. It's a challenge. The question is no longer, how do I fix myself? But what if I'm already enough and the world just lied to me? But here's the catch. To see this, you must first descend, to let the old stories collapse like dying stars. To sit in the dark with the parts of you that howl. This is the work they never warned you about. The work that begins when you stop running. The blade is still in your hand. The cliff still yawns, but now you understand. The enemy isn't your weakness. It's the lie that weakness is the enemy. You don't see it happening. That's the horror. It starts small. A flicker of self-doubt dismissed as imposter syndrome. A pang of envy quickly buried. A dream abandoned with a shrug. Real life doesn't work that way. But beneath the surface, a shadow empire is rising. An architecture of silence, built brick by brick with every suppressed instinct, every stifled cry, every time you chose practicality over purpose. This is the age of the invisible war. Not fought on battlefields, but in the space between your thoughts. The algorithms know it. They feed on your suppressed desires, monetizing your insecurities with pinpoint precision. You scroll past ads for 5-minute meditation fixes and 3-step confidence hacks, unaware that each click deepens the trench between who you are and who you're told to be. The system doesn't want you healed. It wants you hooked. Huxley's nightmare wasn't enslavement by force. It was enslavement by apathy, a population too numb to notice their chains. You see it in the curated highlight reels, the dopamine drip of likes, the endless hustle for validation. The message is clear. Your worth is a commodity. Bid now. But here's the cost. The more you trade your authenticity for approval, the more your psyche fractures. The cracks spread, depression, anxiety, a gnawing emptiness that no achievement can fill. Cognitive biases are the silent mercenaries of this war. Confirmation bias whispers, "See, everyone else has it together. Why can't you?" The Dunning-Kruger effect arms the arrogant with false certainty while paralyzing the thoughtful with doubt. And the sunk cost fallacy chains you to dead-end jobs, toxic relationships, and dreams that died before you were born, all to avoid the shame of admitting, "I was wrong." Neurologically, your brain is a battleground. The amygdala screams, "Danger," at the first hint of vulnerability, while the prefrontal cortex rationalizes paralysis as caution. You're trapped in a feedback loop. The more you avoid discomfort, the more your world shrinks. The less you risk, the less you live. And the less you live, the more you resent yourself. But the deepest wound is collective. When millions of individuals suppress their true selves, society becomes a hall of mirrors, reflecting back a distorted reality. Polarization thrives because no one dares speak their nuance. Innovation stagnates because disruption is reserved for apps, not ideas. Compassion erodes because empathy requires vulnerability. And vulnerability is treason in a world that worships strength. Consider the paradox of modern loneliness. You're more connected than ever, yet starving for meaning. Why? Because connection requires revelation. It demands you show your scars, not your trophies. But you've been conditioned to see revelation as weakness. So you trade intimacy for transactional relationships, depth for convenience, and call it adulting. Camus wrote of Sisyphus, condemned to roll a boulder uphill for eternity. But your boulder isn't failure. It's the fear of failure. The endless grind to prove your worth, to others, to yourself, while the weight crushes your soul. You're not just tired. You're being erased. And here's the cruelest twist. The system depends on your silence. Corporations profit from your self-loathing. Diet pills for bodies deemed flawed. Productivity apps for minds labeled lazy. Institutions thrive on your obedience. Schools that reward compliance. Religions that trade guilt for control. Even your heroes are curated. Sanitized icons stripped of their struggles, airbrushed into myths you could never emulate. But what if the real rebellion isn't burning it all down, but waking up? Picture this. A CEO admits she's terrified. A politician confesses he doesn't have all the answers. A parent says, "I'm doing my best, but I'm scared I'm failing you." These aren't weaknesses. They're revolutions. Each admission cracks the facade, letting light into the collective shadow. But you've been trained to see such honesty as dangerous. Vulnerability is exploitable, they say. Transparency is naive. Yet history's most transformative figures, from Socrates to MLK, didn't win by being unassailable. They won by being unflinching, by standing in the fire of their own doubts and saying, "This is what it means to be human. Now let's build something better." The unseen consequences are not inevitable. They're a choice, a collective trance we've mistaken for reality. But trances can be broken. You just need to ask the right question. What if your weakness isn't the problem, but the antidote? The first act of rebellion is simple. Stop running. Not with your body, your legs are tired anyway, but with your mind. Cease the endless sprint away from what you are. Turn instead to face the storm. The blade in your hand isn't for self-harm. It's for surgery. Nietzsche's amor fati, love of fate, demands more than acceptance. It demands enthusiasm, not "I tolerate my flaws, but I feast on them." Your weaknesses are not roadblocks. They're kindling. Light the match. Consider Marcus Aurelius, writing his meditations on the battlefield. The emperor-philosopher didn't conquer his anxieties. He weaponized them. His insomnia, his fear of failure, his dread of losing loved ones. He transmuted these into a philosophy of resilience. "The impediment to action advances action," he wrote. "What stands in the way becomes the way." Your weaknesses are not obstacles. They're the terrain. Learn to navigate. Frida Kahlo did this literally. Her broken body, her betrayed heart, her shattered spine. She painted them all unflinchingly. What the world called broken, she called evidence. Evidence of survival, evidence of fire. Her weakness became her signature. Her grotesque beauty, a middle finger to a society obsessed with perfection. This is the rebellion. To refuse the dichotomy of strong, weak. To see your fragility not as a liability, but as a dialectic. The Japanese art of kintsugi mends shattered pottery with gold, rendering the cracks more valuable than the original form. Your cracks are not flaws. They're where the light gets in, and where your power gets out. But how? First, reframe the narrative. The Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, visualizing worst-case scenarios to strip fear of its power. Do the same with your weaknesses. Write them down, stare at them, ask, what if this flaw is a latent superpower? The man who stutters becomes a poet of pauses. The woman who cries easily becomes a master of empathy. The chronic overthinker? A strategist in a world of reactors. Second, practice selective surrender. The Buddhists call it non-attachment. Not indifference, but the courage to let go of the illusion of control. Your anxiety about the future? Surrender to it. Let it flood you. Feel the panic, the nausea, the existential vertigo. Then watch as the wave passes and leaves behind clarity. What you resist persists. What you embrace transforms. Third, weaponize your pain. Viktor Frankl wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." The concentration camps taught him that suffering is inevitable, but meaning is a choice. Your pain is not a sentence. It's a forge. Every time you feel the familiar ache of inadequacy, ask, what is this trying to teach me? Then build a curriculum. Fourth, reject the cult of productivity. The world equates busyness with worth, but true rebellion is rest. Sleep when you're tired. Say no to obligations that drain you. Protect your energy like a dragon guards gold. As Nietzsche said, the higher we let ourselves rise, the smaller we seem to those who cannot fly. Study the rebels. Bruce Lee's scrawny frame forced him to innovate beyond traditional martial arts, birthing Jeet Kune Do. Harriet Tubman's seizures and visions didn't disqualify her. They made her a mystic, a conductor of souls through the Underground Railroad. Even Einstein's dyslexia, his slowness, allowed him to dwell longer in the realm of questions, where relativity was born. But here's the catch. Rebellion isn't a one-time event. It's daily discipline. Every morning, you'll face the choice: armor up or strip bare. Play it safe or risk everything for authenticity. The good news? Every act of rebellion strengthens the muscle. The first time you admit, I don't know, it feels like defeat. The 10th time, it feels like freedom. The algorithms will rage. The crowd will jeer. Let them. Your rebellion isn't against them. It's against the internalized dictator that whispers, conform, hide, deserve. And when you stumble, as you will, remember, failure isn't the opposite of success. It's the raw material. The sculptor doesn't fear the marble's resistance. She uses it. You're not becoming strong. You're becoming whole. The final truth awaits. But first, you must survive the metamorphosis. The desert has a question for you. What would you do if you knew your life would loop forever? Nietzsche's eternal recurrence. The idea that every choice, every breath, every moment of cowardice or courage will recur infinitely is not a thought experiment. It's a mirror, a demand, a verdict. If you knew this day would replay for eternity, would you keep numbing yourself with distractions? Would you stay small, polite, acceptable? Or would you finally let the blade in your hand carve the truth into your bones? Here's the revelation that will fracture your reality. You are not here to win. You are here to choose. Every weakness you've labeled a flaw is a decision point, a crossroads where you either shrink or expand. The anxiety that keeps you up at night? It's not a malfunction. It's a signal, a neon sign pointing to the parts of yourself you've abandoned, the parts that still believe in magic, in risk, in more. The ultimate truth is this: your weaknesses are not your shadows. They're your shadow's antidote. The man who fears failure is being asked, what if failure is the only path to genius? The woman who craves approval is being challenged. What if your voice is more valuable than their applause? The addict, the perfectionist, the pleaser, they're all being whispered a secret. Your hunger is not a disease, it's a compass. Nietzsche's Übermensch, the overman, isn't a superior being. It's the person who stops outsourcing their values to the herd, who looks into the abyss of their own chaos and says, I will build a ladder from this. The overman isn't fearless. They're faithful, not in gods or systems, but in their own capacity to burn and rebuild. Here's the paradox you've been avoiding. To become limitless, you must first accept your limits. The caterpillar doesn't want to dissolve. It's terrified, but it trusts the process. Your weaknesses, the parts you've fought so hard to hide, are not your enemies. They're your chrysalis. They're the friction that polishes the diamond, the dark soil where roots grow deeper. But there's a cost. To claim this truth, you must die. Not physically, egoically. You must let the old self, the self that chases validation, that fears scarcity, that worships safety, rot. As the Sufi poet Rumi said, the wound is the place where the light enters you. Your task isn't to heal the wound. It's to become the light. The final rebellion isn't against society. It's against the lie that you're separate from the universe. that your pain is unique, your fears a personal failing. The truth is, you're a single note in a cosmic symphony. Your weaknesses are not unique. They're universal, and in that universality, there's liberation. When you stop seeing yourself as a solitary struggler and start seeing yourself as a participant in the human condition, shame loses its grip. Your tears are not a sign of weakness. They're proof of your membership in the tribe of the broken and reborn. But here's the kicker. The world needs your brokenness. Not your polished Instagram platitudes, but your raw, unfiltered truth. The artist who paints their depression gives others permission to feel. The leader who admits uncertainty invites collective courage. The friend who says, "I'm struggling," becomes a lighthouse for others drowning in silence. This is the final shift. From "I am weak" to "I am the storm." The storm doesn't apologize for its chaos. It doesn't seek permission to exist. It simply is. A force of nature, destructive and creative in equal measure. Your weaknesses, once alchemized, become your storm. They're the wind that clears dead branches, the lightning that ignites dormant fields, the rain that nourishes seeds buried deep in the earth. So what now? You stand at the cliff's edge, blade in hand, understanding at last. The act of plunging it into your heart isn't destruction. It's resurrection. The self you've been clinging to must die for the self you're meant to become, to breathe. Nietzsche wrote, "And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you." You've been staring into the void for years. But here's what he didn't say. The abyss isn't empty. It's full of every version of you that ever was or could be. The weak one, the strong one, the coward, the warrior, the liar, the truth teller. They're all there, waiting for you to stop choosing and start integrating. This is the secret they've kept from you. You are already whole. The cracks, the scars, the doubts, they're not evidence of your brokenness. They're proof of your expansion. Every time you've been shattered, you've grown larger, wiser, more capable of holding paradox. The ultimate truth isn't a destination. It's a practice. A daily choice to meet your weaknesses not with judgment, but with curiosity. To ask, "What is this teaching me?" instead of, "How do I fix this?" The blade is no longer a weapon. It's a tool. The cliff is no longer an end. It's a threshold. You've been running from the wrong thing. Your weakness isn't the enemy. Your resistance to weakness is, so here's your call to arms. Stop trying to be strong. Start being real. The world is waiting for the version of you that's been hiding in the shadows. The one that's messy, unapologetic, alive. The one that doesn't need to win because it's too busy choosing. The storm is coming. Will you stand in it, or will you be the storm? Leave a comment below. What's the blade you've been avoiding? What weakness will you alchemize into power? Share your raw truth. Let this be the first act of your rebellion. Subscribe now to join the rebellion. If you're ready to stop running from the storm and start becoming the storm, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. The metamorphosis begins here. Your next self is waiting. Will you answer the call?